where we've gone there kind of is a nice segue to the article you sent me, which I haven't read all of, but I suppose I will see with fresh eyes. And this is about giving power and compliance officers. So we're segueing into some feminism here. So give power. So this is from JUDGYBITCH.com. The radical notion that women are adults. Okay. So I'm presuming this is some anti-feminist website that I'm reading from, right?
She's good. Her name's Janet Bloomfield. She's written a book too, I think, but I can't think of the name of it right now. But I will give you the background of why I thought that this might be interesting, because I'd read the article, and then not long after I'd watched your video about the woman who wrote a letter to you, who works at a university. And in that, I mean, do you want to give a little spiel about that for those who haven't seen it? Maybe.
Yeah, funnily enough, since I read that out, I don't know whether I'm going to be the social justice agony aunt for people suffering this in college campuses. It's funny because I've gotten 3 emails from students in the thick of it, suffering these courses now at the moment, just this weekend, just like last night and stuff. So I might try and turn it into a regular thing, actually, and go through, change the details of where they are and their name and everything. But I might read those out, so I might get back to those people. So those people who may be watching, I haven't replied to you yet, but I will reply to you. But yeah, so basically this girl whose name I will change to Jessica, she messaged me just saying that she's suffering this. She has a job on the campus that she's in, and they were doing some diversity, touchy-feely kind of training in this, kind of social justice-y stuff. And they were, I don't know, probably sitting in a semicircle getting their kumbayayas on. And basically there was one guy who was saying, I'm Mexican, and what did he say again? I want you to recognize my Mexican heritage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want you to see race.
Yes.
Then this girl is triggered by guns, quite literally, even if it's a fake gun. She's got, she's a special snowflake, so she needs certain protections from certain phobias, what have you. And then, white privilege and everything else. So she's going through all of this, and it was just a phenomenal insight to someone who is terrified of losing their position, getting, obviously not qualifying, not getting their degree. Someone who's terrified of losing their job. And it's heartbreaking to hear this. And I don't know what advice to give them other than, get your head down, grin and bear it, and hopefully the red pilling will happen to them at a later point.
So this is where this is when I heard you, when you got to the advice bit, this is where I thought of this article, because you said, now it's not that I took issue with what you said, but I thought it would be worth qualifying something that you said. You said that these people are going to graduate with sort of worthless degrees and not be useful for anything, so don't worry about them. Now, I agree that they will graduate with useless degrees, but this article that we're looking at now sort of says some of them do get jobs, and this is the type of places they end up, which is in HR departments, because they can boss people around. It's about making rules.
Oh yeah, no,
compliance
I
and
do.
HR.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct. I mean, I said, yeah, for the most part, they'll get a job in Starbucks, but if they're lucky, I suppose. But there is a percentage of those people who will carry on the indoctrination. They'll continue to believe it, and there will be opportunities, because there always is an opportunity for, a Goebbels, somewhere. And in this instance, it'll be in politics, or they'll go back and they'll further reinforced by becoming a Marxist professor on a college campus. But yeah, I mean, these compliance officers, this actually really, I'd like to even go back further with it. It began with the feminization of the corporate world in the first place. I mean, I worked in a job that was, was a good ratio, I suppose, between guys and gals in one particular position. It was a former civil service job. It wasn't too infected by, the feminist stuff and everything that had come through, but in general there was a good banter. I could laugh at joke, I could make really inappropriate politically incorrect jokes. And then I moved into a completely different corporate environment, and it was much more strict, and there was all this kind of compliance training and core values, and we all had to sit in a room and repeat things that we believed about our core values and our strength and integrity. you know, and all this
Did you
kind
have
of
a little
stuff.
plaque?
And you know,
Did you have a
quote this
little
stuff they give
plaque
you.
on your desk with the mission statement on it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And then of course it was like there's certain things. There was like codes of conduct, emails knocking around in terms of what you could and couldn't wear. That's standard enough, standard fare. But in terms of things that could and couldn't be said or what have you, or inappropriate jokes and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, really, that comes down to when you have men and women in the workplace. Women are far more sensitive. This is why there's so many more
Yep.
women complaining about bullshit on the internet and tweets they don't like.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I just think guys
Yep.
have a much
Yeah.
thicker skin about this stuff, and you know, guys, you know, they
Yeah.
look at it and they say, well, look, women are called bitches and whores and sluts and all this stuff, and you're thinking, yeah, but guys are have their sexuality questioned by other guys, and they're called gay or called faggots, whatever,
All the time. Yeah.
all the fucking
Yeah.
time. We just get a
All the time.
gender specific tongue lashing from other people, and it's a completely different way of going, guys. But that's
Yeah.
obviously ignored.
It is about whinging, because and who whinges the most and who whinges the loudest, and it's women. And there's probably women listening to this right now, but this is not just a throwaway line. I mean, the Pew Research report about online harassment showed this, that slightly more men than women get harassment online. Now, this poll's a few years old now. I think it was
You
2013,
kind of
14.
broke up just a little bit there.
Oh, sorry. How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Pew Research report showed that men get more online harassment than women, but women get different types. So women get more sexual harassment online, but men get more threats of physical violence. Anyway, it's not that much different. Men get a little more. But then when it came to reporting on how you felt about it, 2/3 of men said that they didn't care or weren't bothered very much, whereas 2/3, or something like 40% of women, said that it really bothered them. And only about 15% of men said that it really bothered them. I mean, women are more sensitive. They don't grow up. I mean, I don't know if you remember, my high school was the moment you got to school, someone was giving you shit and you were giving shit back to someone else. And this just went on all day. And that's what high school was. And it was fun for the most part. No one really got bent out of shape. Occasionally someone might, but that's how boys grow up. That's how we interact. I mean, sociologists have studied this for years. They know that this is a way that boys bond, giving each other crap. Giving each other crap is a sign of acceptance into a group.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of male bonding. Women don't do that though. And so, like you said, when they arrive in the workplace and there's this banter going on, they feel a little bit uncomfortable about it. But of course, what do? We have to bend over backwards to the women's standard every time.
It's funny. The problem with it is that some women know that some are genuinely afraid, some are genuinely obviously innocent to everything that's happening, but others know how to work the system in their favor. And so, in other words, it's like, I know that if I complain enough, there will be guys who will white knight, and the system will white knight for me to help those poor unfortunate women's. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a female strategy. You want to do you want to read?
Shall we crack on with this article?
Yeah.
You are kind of a little bit breaking up intermittently. Mostly I can hear you, but I don't think it's like your microphone. I do think it's a connection issue, but we'll continue.
Oh, fuck.
All
right.
Yeah, I can hear you saying, oh, fuck. But then every time you want to say more than 2 words, that's where the problems are. So, please feel free to curse all day long. Give women power and women will create morally righteous ways to abuse it. Compliance officer. The job itself sounds like a warning. What exactly is a compliance officer? Sounds like a stickler to me. Compliance officer. It's one of the hottest careers today. The guardian of an organization's good corporate citizenship. The job ranges from creating and enforcing guidelines and policies that ensure a company's integrity to promoting ethical standards and values that form strong workplace cultures. Compliance officers are the ones who meet government investigators at the door when they knock. I know the type. Is anyone surprised that most compliance officers are women, and that these women are the ones who create corporate cultures that actively undermine the strategic goals of the organization and help to ensure those businesses fail? HR officers of all, again, it just comes down to, if you really want a free market in every respect, the free market will always, cream will always rise to the top if you let it. If you're going to keep the cream down, you're going to have a problem. In every respect, we need regulation to be kept to the minimum as possible. HR officers of all stripes are overwhelmingly women, and their qualifications amount to soft degrees in liberal arts, featuring a lot of cultural Marxism and not much in the way of critical thinking, strategy, or math. So pretty soft qualification.
Yeah, this is interesting because now I'm going to give away how old I am, but I started university.
You do that, and I'm going to go pee. Okay, I'll be right back in a second.
All right. So just for you out there who are listening, I went to university in 1992. HR, as it was known then, was a new field. This was a new field, human resources management. And everybody knew, and I came in maybe in the first few years of this, and everybody knew that this was a bludge subject, that this was easy. Time you took human resource management. Yeah, exactly. But I did say I started in 1992, but I was only 17 in my first year of university, so I'm not that old. You can do the sums. All right. You got your first pube in 1992, somebody said in the chat. Interesting. Anyway, so HR is a soft subject. It was easy to do, and a lot of girls did it. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So you're following so far? Good. And then when I came out of university in 1995, I got a job. Now, in the early days, a lot of companies, when I first came out of university, didn't have HR departments. You got interviewed by the people you would be working with. That was it. Then after a few years, HR departments just bloomed. They grew. And I always thought, why? This is a cost that isn't necessary to your business. You do not need HR departments. I just came, my last job, I just came back from Japan. I was in a position where I had to hire people.
Were you in Japan?
And yeah.
Okay.
I was in Japan until February this year. I came back to Australia in February this year.
Well, you were a recruiter or something?
I worked at a university, and basically I was a second in charge of this, the English faculty.
I think we've best reconnected because it's just dropping out too much.
Really?
Yeah,
that sucks.
Yeah. Do you reckon you just hop off and hop back on?
Yeah, I'll jump out.
Okay. So yes, I think he was talking about HR and how it's obviously attracted a lot more women than anything else. So yeah, so just to look at that again, HR officers of all stripes are overwhelmingly women, and their qualifications amount to soft degrees in liberal arts. It was not always thus. This is an excerpt from a new book coming out called Death by HR, The Great Slackening, and I am looking forward to this one. HR departments have in many companies been captured by the political forces outside the company that regulate labor, punish violations with fines and public shaming, and pressure companies into paying off diversity activists looking for support for their causes. And sinecures, I haven't heard of this word before, for their political allies. The increasing complexity of regulations and government enforcement have, as in academia and hospitals, increased the number of deadweight HR employees needed to handle administration, like the commissars and parallel political officers of the old USSR. HR functionaries are unconsciously acting not only for managements wanting managers to avoid legal and ethical trouble, but for governments reaching into the organization to achieve political goals and promote government control of private businesses. Smart managements will neutralize these tendencies by paying close attention to attitudes and activities of HR managers and staff. While companies need to avoid trouble with governments, they need the best employees and competitive products and services to survive and thrive. So it sounds as if, from an intellectual point of view, whenever you have this kind of regulation in your workforce, you're always going to stifle the creativity of your employees as well.
Mm. And what companies, particularly large companies, have done is they know that this is antithetical to their goals. So what they do, it's a cost of doing business for them. So, for example, diversity officer is now a popular thing to have. So they hire someone as diversity officer. Diversity officer comes up with a diversity policy, right? And this is just a deliberate stunt to ward off criticism of not being diverse enough, right? And they
To
can
stifle
say
criticism, not being diverse enough. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and they can just say, "Oh, we have a diversity policy, yes, and we have we have some lofty goal to reach 40% of women in management by 2025." And if you don't get there, it doesn't matter. Oh, we've actually increased the number of women, but we're not quite there yet. This is what they do. It's a cost of doing business. In a recent video, I put a book in there called The Diversity Machine. It's an excellent book. It just tells you that this entire movement, diversity, is all about, it's an industry in and of itself. Consultants, it employs people. And like you say, if you're Apple or Google, what is this is a small cost. It's a small price to pay. You hire a couple of people, you put out a policy. It's virtue signaling writ large. That's all it is.
Of course. Yeah. So I'll go on to dead weights that hector, punish, shame, control, enforce regulations that may or may not serve any strategic purpose. It all sounds so familiar. I'll be interested to see if the author calls out the real problem here. Women. Certainly, the book identifies women as key players in the HR landscape. Stereotypes and generalizations about female-dominated organizations would suggest that they are more emotional, less logical, more safety-orientated. Well, they are more risk-averse as a gender, of course.
Yeah.
And right, so literally the next sentence proved what I'm saying, and less willing to take risks to accomplish higher goals, more likely to talk about feelings than to act. And this is the reason why we have a completely different type of, psychologists have a different model for dealing with the male and the female brain, even though now you see, mental health being feminized to the point where men are less likely to go and seek mental health solutions because they know that the psychiatry and psychology industries are completely dominated by women who are choosing a feminized brain technique, if you will. For things like OCD, you're far better in going with cognitive behavioral therapy. That's usually less effective for women in a lot of instances. But men prefer it because it's more goal orientated. It's more problem solving based. Women want to kind of talk it out.
There was an article that popped up not long ago. Did you see where they asked small groups of young boys, like kids, little kids under the age of 10, and young girls, and they got them to sit down and talk about their feelings, and then they asked them what they thought about that, and that the girls overwhelmingly enjoyed it and thought it was a good process. And a lot of the boys' comments were, it was weird, it was a waste of time. And these are little kids, right? Because that's the way boys are like,
they're not they're not in any way indoctrinated to believe the things. They're completely unbiased, and there's no filter, which is what's great about kids.
Yeah, it's just great. Yeah.
Right. So more likely to talk about feelings than to act, right? And more cliquish. Cliquish, is that a word?
Right? Cliquish, yeah.
Cliquish and petty, and less likely to focus on the larger goals of the organization. Those stereotypes are more or less true. Women are more emotional than men is a polite way of saying women are less able than men to master their emotions. In any given situation, men are just as likely as women to feel a particular feeling: anger, sadness, embarrassment, etc. There really is not any difference between men and women's capacity for emotion, but men are able to control those feelings and not allow feelings to dictate actions to a much greater degree. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Zoe Quinn, was no? Who's that Watson girl? Rebecca
Watson.
I think it was
the
her.
Elevator girl, elevator gate. Yeah.
Elevator girl. It might have been her who said something like, so women physically cry more than men because their tear ducts are smaller. Right?
Yes.
So
Yes,
it builds
I heard
up. It flows. Again, I apologize if I'm attributing this to the wrong person, but I think it was her. And then basically, guys. So no, what she's saying is, guys get the urge to cry but their tear ducts are holding it back because they're bigger. And you're like, no. We can tell the difference between what we know that very specific emotional feeling when you're about to cry, and when we've all done it. We know what it's like when it's about to come on you, right? I am like I watch like you ever go to a wedding, say, and you're sitting there in the pews and you're watching a bride and groom do give their vows. Now, are there guys who will cry? Yeah, there might be guys who might cry as well, but I don't. I've never cried at a wedding. I just stand there and it's like, this is very nice. I'm nodding my head. You know, everybody's applauding when they're saying, and now present Mr. and Mrs. whatever. And then you look around and you'll see all these women, you know, battling with their mascara as it's running down their eyes. So they had a desire to cry. I had zero desire. It did not impact me in that way emotionally whatsoever. There was no buildup of tears in my fucking eyes to begin with. I wasn't battling to keep it down. I had a completely, it was like we were watching two completely different events. Right?
And and this is also an excuse because women tried for a while to say that, you know, this being emotional is a stereotype and it's just sexist to say so. But empirical evidence has borne it out. And so then they started on with the emotional intelligence, right? EQ, emotional intelligence. But what they do is they conflate being emotional with emotional intelligence. They're not the same thing. I think the best example is to say, I'll give you two statements. That's offensive, statement number one. I find that offensive.
So, sorry, what was statement number one?
Statement number one is, that's offensive.
That's offensive.
Statement number two is, I find that offensive.
Right.
Now, which one is the emotionally intelligent response?
Well, the first one is a subjective claim, right? About because again, it doesn't necessarily. It's all about what a person would find offensive, right? The other.
Yeah. So there's no. I haven't given you a specific situation, but the one with emotional intelligence is the one that is able to realize that it is him or her that is having the reaction. So to say that I find that offensive shows some emotional intelligence. For someone who, you know, someone who just will grandiosely state and assert, that's offensive.
Yeah. So
shows no emotional intelligence whatsoever. Yeah, at least you realize that it is you that is being offended, not everyone. You're not speaking for everyone.
Yeah.
But women do that one more than, you know, oh, that's offensive. Just straight out when they hear something, it's like, wait a minute, who are you talking for again? Who are you speaking for? Because so-and-so over here heard the exact same joke as you did and didn't get offended. So, you know, but I digress.
Exactly. So this is why you will often find women crying at work more than men. Not men. Men consistently display greater affinity than women for logic, rationality, and objectivity. Again, this was written by a woman, so clearly she has internalized misogyny, right?
Absolutely.
Feminists long ago stopped trying to disprove this unfortunate gender difference and instead switched to insisting that either A, logic isn't valuable, or B, logic isn't real. It's just a tool of the patriarchy. Isn't everything?
Yeah.
The hilarious irony. Sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
The hilarious irony is that feminists deploy their shaky grasp of logic, trying to logically prove that logic isn't real or doesn't matter. They could claim decisive victory if only their arguments were logical. It's an assuming conundrum. Watching Richard Dawkins address the logic of feminism in science, called postmodernism, is quite affirmational. Dawkins turns feminist science into a comedy routine. Just by citing it, it's worth a view. God, I need glasses. I'm stumbling over these words here. Women are absolutely more risk averse than men for some pretty important evolutionary reasons. Men take greater risks to raise their attractiveness to mates and thereby increase the likelihood of reproductive success. Women keep their risks to a minimum because babies are hard to keep alive without a mother. It's a straightforward cost-benefit analysis.
And that Dawkins clip, which, you know, probably not worth showing, but I think it's more than 5 minutes long. But that's the famous clip where he talks about feminists claiming that science is sexist because One of the reasons is that the speed of light is privileged over other speeds. And see, he said this. I mean, that might be 10 years old, but he said he says privilege, and he says, "Have you noticed they use this word a lot?" And since he said that, privilege has blossomed, tenfold. It's very prophetic what he's saying in that speech.
Oh, I didn't realize it. Maybe you can play a couple of seconds of it.
Yeah, I think it's 2 clips back to back in one.
I recommend 2 recent books that have splendidly blown the whistle on this kind of thing. Paul Gross and Norman Levitt, Higher Superstition, and Alan Fockel and Jean Ricon's Intellectual Imposture, which masquerades under another name in the American market. The American anthropologist Matt Cartnell has summed up the basic credo of the postmodern critique of science. Anybody who claims to have objective knowledge about anything is trying to control and dominate the rest of us.
I'd like to play more, but for obvious reasons,
Yeah,
I won't play the whole thing.
it takes a while to get going. Yeah.
So suppose that running a 5% risk of death can move an organism's fertility from the 50th percentile for their sex to the 90th. So suppose they're running a 5% risk of for a male, this might pay a Darwinian dividend, whereas for females, the cost would be more likely to outweigh the benefits. Well, of course. And is it any wonder that we're hard? We have a gynocentric society to begin with, right?
Yep.
Is it any wonder that biologically we're slightly gynocentric, and that men would white knight as a means of protecting, potential mates, right?
But this is a strange divergence, isn't it, in our society now, where that biological need that's happened over thousands of years for men to white knight to protect is being challenged because women have equality, and yet we're constantly being lambasted. And there's a young generation of men growing up going, "Fuck this,"
Yeah.
Why am I being persecuted just for having a dick?
Yeah. So as I said, it's going to encourage more and more men to go MGTOW.
Yeah.
Right. And it all comes back to, feminists are using the very tendencies for self-preservation that men have, and the very altruistic impulses that men have towards women against men. And they're doing it in such a way that they want men's help. So in other words, I think it's something that Karen Strahan said when I did a stream with them before on the Honey Badgers. Patriarchy's oppressing me. Quick, patriarchy, protect me. Right.
Yeah.
They
exactly.
need protection from men because they're being oppressed by men. Right. So they get us on 2 counts. We're their servants, and yet we're also their slaves, but also their enemies. Right.
Yep.
So sadly, the stereotypes. Now, I should point out, on the other side of the coin, I had somebody post on a MGTOW video I did criticizing the MGTOW as a movement. Less is the philosophy, more is what the movement's become recently. As someone said, women are the natural enemies of men, the natural predators of men, or something like that. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other live stream. I would love to have a live stream about MGTOW because I think it's a fascinating subject. And there's
it is.
There's there's such a spectrum of MGTOW out there. I don't know if you listen to someone CS MGTOW, another guy called Coltane, another guy called Thinking Ape, Stardust, I think he used to be called.
Stardust, yeah. No, I'm familiar with them. I'm familiar with the community.
Until Deer chimes in. Those guys talk about evolutionary psychology. They talk about behavior. They try to bring some empiricism to it. But then at the other end of MGTOW, you have guys that are just like, fuck women, stay away from them, don't go near them, And then there's a spectrum all the way in between.
Yeah, and women will use you for your resources and nothing else. Notice, this is just my opinion.
Sandman here.
Right?
Sandman here.
Yeah, thank you for your donation. So
Yeah.
sadly, the stereotypes about women. Yeah, no, it is a conversation we can definitely have at another point. I'd like to get into it. Sadly, the stereotypes about women being petty and mean are more likely to focus on the trivial and not the larger organizational goals. Are also true, not for each and every woman, obviously, but for women as a group. And those tendencies are exacerbated by women's tendency towards collectivism and their intolerance for women who break from the pack.
The pack.
This is true. So that they're more of a consensus kind of an animal in a sense. They don't
Yep.
want to. Men are happy enough to be out there on their own with their opinion and face the persecution, whereas women tend not to. This is something that Black Pigeon Speak spoke about in another video.
Yep. Yep.
Did you want to say
Collectivism,
anything
and well, just to pick up the point about collectivism, I mean, look at what feminism is. I mean, it is actively promoting a sort of socialist Marxist agenda. And I mean, funny that a lot of the openly the biggest feminists in Australia who have the most clout and the most, I mean, one of them is an active communist. She says so, like, out loud. And this is apparently not embarrassing anymore to even say this in public. But I mean, it's so obvious that women tend towards this way. They tend away from competition, towards collectivism, towards consensus, towards collaboration, whereas men are more sort of that narrow-focused, competitive.
And doing it all toward under the guise usually of further and further protections. Silver Pill, I see you, and you've written LOL, computing forever Sandman is perfect. Well, thank you, Silver Pill, for your donation. Where was I? Sorry, the pack. The tendency is so strong. Psychologist Meredith Fuller has written an entire book on the subject, breaking the mean girls down into categories and offering strategies for how to manage these women. I'm going to increase the size of this because I'm stumbling over words and I need glasses. Working with Bitches, identify the 8 types of office mean girls and rise above workplace nastiness is a book I recommend men in particular to read. Women reading this book will simply recognize women we've been dealing with our whole lives. Men will learn exactly how women operate to punish, control, and oppress other women. After reading this book, men will see innocuous conversations, interactions between women for what they are: women abusing their power over other women. And I've noticed this when I've had female bosses, other women saying, "Oh my God, she's such a bitch." And I've seen other women say, "I wish I had a male boss for this very reason."
Yeah. Yep. Yep. They love rules. That's what I've noticed about women bosses. They love rules.
Any examples in workplaces that you've seen this happen in?
Oh,
Extreme?
just in one that I experienced myself, where my immediate supervisor was a woman, and then my immediate boss, the boss above her, which was also my boss, was also a woman. And yeah, just casual chatting while you were working at a desk with another minion like me. This is, I was literally 22. This is my second job out of university, 23 maybe. And just chatting with someone in the workstation next to me as I was doing my work. And they would come out and go,
the person in the workstation next to you was doing what?
They were doing work and I was doing work. I mean, this was a accounting firm, company. We just had simple sort of accounts payable, accounts receivable jobs, data entry stuff, most of it. Something you can talk and do at the same time, once you've mastered it. And this was absolutely not allowed. Soon as I had a male supervisor, it was fine. The attitude was, are you getting your work done? If you can get your work done and you can talk at the same time, fine. But with the women, it was, no, you cannot talk. You must work. You cannot do this, which is funny because women are the ones who say, who think they're the best multitaskers for some reason.
Yeah, it's true. I had that in another job where it was like a call center type deal. I was there for many years. I don't know how I actually stuck it out for so long. This was the job before I went into the really corporate job, but there was a female boss and everybody hated her because, she would always be kind of looking down the room. You'd see this head bobbing up as soon as she heard a conversation of somebody talking. And you're just like, when I had a male boss running the show, it was exactly as you said. There was a much more, and I don't know whether it's guys are they're more relaxed about potentially things going awry and catching it and dealing with it, whereas women are
Yeah.
afraid that I can't allow any kind of deviation in behavior for fear that things would collapse and what I would
Control
do when
freaks.
that happens. So I
Yeah.
think they're kind of feeling their way through the management, whereas men are thinking more
Yeah.
pragmatically. Just, well, look, clearly from a practical point of view, if people are getting their work done, it shouldn't matter how they're achieving it.
And I give you another example. I had to liaise with other departments about payments, and they said, "Okay, you call this person for it was." We took care of the Asia Pacific region. So you said, "Call this person for Taiwan. You call this person for Japan. You call this." Okay, these are just people in my department. Some of them on the same floor. Some of them on the floor below me. Now, I would call them and you'd never get an answer. And so I just started getting up out of my seat and walking down to the department because I found that I could get answers really quickly like that, because they may not have been answering the phone, but they were there and they were just talking to somebody else. So, and this was a major source of frustration for the boss, because she's like, you can't just get up and walk down. I said, well, I can, and I'm getting the work done quicker. See, she couldn't argue with the fact that I was getting the work done, and I was getting it done very efficiently. But she just had a freak out that I had actually deviated from the plan.
There's a
Anyway,
certain
that's
kind of mommy effect to this, isn't there? You're being treated like it's like a really strict mother.
yeah,
The maternal instincts are coming out no matter what,
a
and we're the
teacher.
children in a sense. We're not allowed to step out of line or misbehave. That's what it's about. That's what it is. It's misbehave. They consider it to be a form of misbehavior of their flock in a sense.
Yeah, and again, we're orientated towards the results. Look, it doesn't matter how I do it; I'm getting the job done. But they're more orientated towards how they feel about the way you're doing it and the rules.
Exactly. Right. So, women are the main sources of misogyny in our culture. Nowhere is that more true than in the workplace, where actual things are at stake. Now, imagine working in a field like HR completely dominated by women. Here's Ben to give you a hint. I can still remember the first time I walked into a NASH or Nashram event and looked around. There were about 100 people in the room. Of that number, the 6 guys, including me, stuck out like sore thumbs. It kind of made me laugh because I've never worked in a job where the men outnumbered the women. It doesn't really bother me, but I've always been a little curious about why the imbalance occurs. I don't want to lay any blanket statements on the ladies out there, but my little experience seems to point to most of them focusing on compliance and how to keep things safe. More of the males, however, seem to be focused on how to keep the goals moving forward and holding on to the strategic focus. Like I said, I don't like blanket statements and generalities because I've certainly met dozens of female HR pros with a high strategic focus. However, due to the high percentage of women overall, there certainly are a lot of them who are doing that compliance work. Women love creating rules and then forcing others to comply. The pettiness of it matches the pettiness of women's orientation towards the world. Women don't see the bigger picture. There is no forest, only trees. This, of course, is precisely the orientation we need women to have in order to raise newborns to functioning, productive adulthood. But that is not what women are engaging in doing in the corporate world. Let me remind you of feminist scholar Carol Gillian, who wrote a book called In a Different Voice, Psychological Theory and Women's Development, in which she posits that women and men have very different understandings of what constitutes a moral decision. For women, morality is always contextual, situational, and dependent upon the particular situation and the relevant players. For men, morality is universal, objective, and applies to everyone equally, regardless of circumstances. Do you want to take something from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just this sort of self-centeredness, which, again, has a biological function, right? For the looking after and raising of children. I mean, if applied to that sphere, yes, perfectly acceptable, fine, and is needed, quite frankly. But
Yeah.
put in the corporate world, no, doesn't make sense. Doesn't work.
Yeah, no, exactly. So women's morality is designed for the domestic sphere, and men's morality is for the public sphere, and this makes perfect sense. In the public domain, for example, men might create moral rules about the distribution of food, that apply equally to everyone. In the home, those rules make no sense. Newborns eat no food. Newborns eat no food, and the age. What is it? Newborns eat no food, and the age and activity level of each individual will dictate how much each person receives, and this is both reasonable and moral in that context. I didn't understand that sentence.
Well, yeah. So basically, men will come up with a moral idea that, for equality, but we're flexible enough to realize that in the context of the home, that doesn't apply. So, of course, babies they don't eat no food, but they eat, pureed very little. And the 6-year-old will eat less than the 12-year-old and will eat less than the adults, and everybody gets what they need, right?
Okay.
The male is able to, he's able to realize the context and apply it. And then when you go down under the little video there, and you read the rest of it, when you ask women to transfer their sense of morality to the public sphere, chaos, injustice, and unfairness reign. And women double down on their pettiness to try and make their situational morality work where universal rules are required. So this is the opposite way around, where women have to step out of their, how does she describe it? Their situational morality, in the home, and apply more universal rules like equality across everybody. And they can't do it. They can't step out of this sort of self-centered situational morality.
Yeah, exactly. So this certainly explains the desire for particularly special privileges. You can see where it would start to reorder the shape of the workplace. I'm just oh, sorry, I thought that was much longer because I was seeing the scroll bar is like only like midway, but actually we're at the end of the article now. Okay, so among the few CHROs who do know, I almost always find a common distinguishing quality. They have worked in line operations such as sales, services, or manufacturing, or in finance. The celebrated former CHRO of GE, Bill Conity, was a plant manager before Jack Welch brought him into HR. Conity weighed in on key promotions and succession planning, working hand in glove with Welch in a sweeping overhaul of the company. Marianne Elliott, the CHRO of Marsh, had several managerial roles outside HR. She is overhauling the HR pipeline to bring in other people with business experience. Santrap Misra, who left Hindustan, or whatever the name of this is, in 1996, before a close partner of the chairman, Kumar, whatever, working on an organization restructuring the development and P&L managers. He runs a $2 billion business as well as heading HR at a $45 billion conglomerate. Operation experience is precisely what universalizes the role. Operation experience allows you to understand the universal goals and strategies of the business and get past petty departmental power struggles. I think this is really the key salient issue here. It's the removal of any kind of personal, emotional investment or accountability purely for the end product and for a kind of a, let's use this phrase, greater good, the greater good of the organization. It's taking the personal completely out of it. That's a very difficult thing for a lot of women to do. As you see, women rarely have.
And doing away with the notion of fairness. Fairness has nothing to do with this. Fairness is irrelevant. We're trying to maximize efficiency here. It has nothing to do with fairness or equality or inclusivity. These are all irrelevant traits that you bring nothing to the table except being a barrier to the operational efficiency.
Angela, Garnet, goodness, such generalizations. How many women do you actually know? Well, look, I mean, Angela, you could say hashtag not all day long. We have to talk about averages and percentages here at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that Devin Tracy has, popularized this hashtag not all. He's done an enormous favor to people. Like, if we have to stop every time and say, oh, by the way, we're not talking about all women. Of course, we're talking in generalities. This is understood. We're not talking down to you. We're not condescending. We are assuming that we're saying not all. This is a given. And if you need that spelled out for you every time, I'm sorry, maybe it's another conversation you need to be involved in.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we here? Okay, so what I find most interesting about the women in HR phenomenon is what impact the clustering of petty tyrants and dictators has on the male workforce. Does the presence of female compliance officers affect whether men get hired, promoted, and enjoy their work? What do you think? Would it? Have you experienced anything like that?
I haven't personally, but I
they
must
enjoy their
say, oh,
There you
what
go.
happened there? Yeah, I personally haven't experienced that, but I think I'm subscribed to a guy, I don't know if you know him, called Noholdsbarred. He's
Yes.
got yeah, he makes some funny stuff. It's pretty out there. But I think he's in his mid-20s in Australia, and he has real experience of this. And I think this is I'm of a generation. I'm 42 years of age. I have not experienced this. It skipped me over. This preferencing women, giving women only scholarships, giving sort of women only seminars on leadership so we can, train the next generation of women next generation of women leaders. For some reason, we need women leaders. Why don't we just need good leaders? Why do they need to be women?
It's funny you bring that up. When I worked in my last corporate job, I was in the marketing department, and I was doing their online editing work, so all their blogging and their public relations and their video editing and all the content curation and creation. And there was a seminar, a women in business seminar, and it was all the usual type stuff that you would expect. It was a room, a large room that it was like you were at a wedding in a sense. A big gigantic corporate lesbian wedding. No, it was like 200 women in business in a room, and you had 4 leaders, MDs, and 1 CEO from various different large corporates here in Ireland, and they're being interviewed about how to rise above the parapet and smash the glass ceiling and all the usual stuff, and what it's like being a woman and everything else. And there was a portion of this conversation where they were handing out awards for women who'd recently had promotions, and they'd been promoted to like standard enough, some of them kind of middle or upper middle management roles. And I thought to myself, I'm filming this, and I'm thinking, but men don't do this. If you want real equality, why are you celebrating mediocrity? Why are you celebrating this stuff?
Exactly.
If men aren't celebrating it, why are you making a big deal of it?
Exactly.
And then at the end, one of the MDs was talking and giving this big rousing speech to all the girls, and it was all this kind of emotional rhetoric. And then she said at the end, we can do it all, and we can do it better than any man. Whoop! And the crowd goes wild. And myself and the guy next to me, we were pretty much the only guys in the room, and we looked at each other going, are we going to get sacrificed or something? There's going to be some gigantic, feminist, riot right now. And I thought, hold on for a second here. If a guy had said that at a conference this, you'd never hear that.
He'd be sacked. He'd have to apologize, and then he may lose his job, or if he didn't, he'd be demoted.
Yeah.
Just for saying it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've overheard conversations like that as well in the office. Some similar stuff. Like they had a bunch of interns coming in the office in one of the departments next to me, and they were saying things like, oh, we need to get more girl interns because the girls are the best. Yeah, men suck. And now I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, if I went to HR, I'd be laughed at if I thought that was offensive or whatever. But if I was a woman and the gender's reversed and there were guys saying it about women, I could march down to HR and I could say, hey, I feel oppressed. I feel marginalized. I found that offensive myself, and they get disciplined.
Yeah. Well, you absolutely know that's true. And I don't know if you saw that article that came out last week, and I was in the process of doing a video on it today that showed that 52% of women in the UK had been sexually harassed in the workplace.
Okay.
Have you seen this? And then, of course, this is an alarming. This is what the Guardian ran with. This is what the BBC ran with. Of course, once you actually go to the source data, of course, they have these very loose definitions of what sexual harassment is, right? So one of the biggest category of sexual harassment that women had faced was men saying other things about women, either other women in the workplace or women in general. So, that could be construed as, oh, women are physically weaker than men.
Right.
This was considered a form of sexual harassment. Or say something like, let's say, you're hanging out at the water cooler with some guy. You don't think anybody's within earshot, and you go, oh, did you see Wimbledon last night? And Marina Sharapova, gee, she looked hot in that outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy agreed, and he said, oh, yeah, she's a stunner. And a girl overheard that.
Yeah.
That is sexual harassment. And this was the most common type of sexual harassment.
Yeah,
And so,
maybe because they weren't. This is the irony. They like the attention because women love the attention. As long as the compliments are going their way, but the compliments are going their way, they can choose to take whatever way they want.
But even then, like, so when it comes to compliments, like, it's only a compliment if they perceive it to be a compliment, or maybe it is a compliment, but it's not the compliment they like, so it's sexual harassment. Or maybe it's a compliment, but it's not coming from the person they want it to come from, so it's sexual harassment. Because this is the whole way feminists want to move the legal system. You can see it in Canada with rape cases, is it's listen and believe. My subjective feelings about whether I've been sexually harassed is more important than some objective standard under the law, like a reasonable person test, for example, which is something we have here in Australia. So yeah, it's they're playing into all the old stereotypes that they want to reject. It's all feelings based. If Dave, if you feel you've been sexually harassed, then you have been. That's all the proof you need.
I feel the chat is sexually harassing me right now, and I'm loving it. Press 1 for sexual harassment. Yeah, so can we get some ones? I know. Nothing? Chat?
No one's feeling terrible. I think the chat, does the chat even listen? I think they're just having a chat between themselves.
I don't know. We're not even live right now.
Look at that. Look at here come the ones. Look at them.
Finally, for fuck's sake. All right. So, and do female compliance officers represent the beginning of measurable declines in stock prices and overall returns? You think? Well, it's like anything else. Just stick on a bunch of regulation, and you can always expect this to happen. I mean, it's like economic regulation. It's always the beginning of socialism. Larger and larger government, or in this case, larger and larger corporate governance and control.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll go on to the final paragraph because I'm eager to move on to the next story. In other words, does giving women this kind of power result in women abusing that power over men? We already know they abuse it over women. And does that lead to sinking the whole business? I'm guessing the answer is yes. And yes, women compliance officers absolutely use their power to abuse the workforce, both male and female. And the more women in HR, the more likely a company is to tank on the market. And she's going to talk about that more in her book. It's a good article. And when I amend this stream, I'll include a link to this and the other articles in the description box. Let's move on to Brexit.
The only thing...
Sorry, go ahead. Finish up on that.
I said the only thing I was going to add was I was in contact with Mike Buchanan. You know Mike Buchanan? What's his party, Men and Boys? And he's got all the research about how women affect corporate performance. And if anyone's interested, have a look at the study in Norway when they increased their board representation to 40% and corporate performance went down.
Right.
That's all.
Not a surprise.